Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. The first of the three stories I'll be covering in today's episode broke late Friday, and a couple of you noticed it and actually commented on it in the comment section in Friday's episode. And that is the news that Blade Runner 2 is continuing to move forward. You know, all the time they mention that they're going to make a sequel to something or a prequel, and it never actually goes anywhere. It just kind of like disappears into development hell. But this, it's the sequel to Ridley Scott's famous classic noir sci-fi film with Harrison Ford, and the reason it's looking good and looking promising is that they've hired a screenwriter. But don't get too excited because it's Michael Green, one of the screenwriters on Green Lantern. And, you'd think Ridley Scott learned his lesson with Prometheus and Damon Lindelof, who totally screwed him over, I feel there. I feel Ridley Scott had all the makings of a fantastic entry into his Alien franchise, or non-entry, or, surprise entry, and then the writing is just what really fell apart. And this is a big theme that I talk about a lot here on Beyond the Trailer, because I feel so strongly that these days screenwriters are chosen politically. Either the screenwriter himself is a friend of someone involved with the film, or their agent is a friend, or they want to keep it in-house at the agency. But basically, I don't understand how what is clear to every moviegoer, critic, and I'm sure secretly to all the filmmakers, is that they are having absolutely no respect for what is the most important step in the movie making process, and that's the script. So, and also Michael Green, I'm all for giving somebody a chance, and it's not like he's the screenwriter who's never worked in this genre before, so let's see if maybe this is where his sweet spot is. This is a guy who's worked in adventure sci-fi before, and failed miserably, just totally failed. I mean, he took one of DC's strongest comic book properties and made it just, something that even the most diehard DC fans admit needs to be rebooted already after just one try. So Michael Green, inexplicably hired to write Blade Runner 2. We'll see what happens. Also, on a side note, they're thinking of having a female lead for Blade Runner. That's what's been teased. But I have to say, Michael Green aside, no matter who's writing this, I would be really upset if the only way that this is at all related to Blade Runner is in name only. Harrison Ford, still totally, well, I guess it's debatable, but, he can still act. He did a pretty good job in 42. He's coming back for Star Wars. I'm going to be pretty upset if he's not in a Blade Runner sequel. All right, more sequel news. It was announced that Alice in Wonderland 2 is also finally moving forward. Of course, I liked the first Alice in Wonderland, but I know a number of you did not, but it did make over $1 billion. So Disney's, of course, going to not just leave that sitting on the shelf. It's just a huge opportunity for a sequel. But I think they perhaps might have heard that a lot of you didn't like it because they will not be moving forward with Tim Burton. Now, of course, we probably might never know if that was an internal decision made by the studio or if maybe Tim Burton just wants to move on. But anyway, it's weird because the first Alice in Wonderland so had his fingerprints all over it, but we're going to be getting something a little different for the second one, which perhaps might be good news to a lot of you. So who's it going to be? Who's going to be directing it? That's the big news. James Bobbin, or Bobin, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but the guy from Flight of the Conchords is going to be directing the film. He's already in-house at Disney. He directed the first Muppet film. He's with Jason Segel. He's directing The Muppets 2 right now with Ricky Gervais and Tina Fey and Ty Burrell. And it'll be interesting. I think, he probably has a good comedic, quirky eye for Alice in Wonderland 2, but once again, talk about themes. We have, screenwriters who are incompetent being hired for these giant films, and then we also have directors being brought onto giant films who really have no experience with CGI and special effects. And here you have this situation again. And Alice in Wonderland is just such a huge property. It's surprising to see someone like James Bobbin, who's just worked with felt, real puppets, move into this realm. It's a tall order. I think the only good example that Disney has done is they chose, I believe his name is Robert Stromberg. I might not be getting the last name right off the top of my head perfectly, but Robert Stromberg, he is the set designer on Avatar, Alice in Wonderland, Oz the Great and Powerful, and Disney promoted him to director for Maleficent. And what the production designer does is they create the visual world, they make sure it all stays together and is cohesive for the director. So clearly he has a lot of experience in the special effects arena, and now he's going to graduate to storytelling. That seems like a smarter move to me. Logistically, instead of taking someone and having them, practice special effects on something like Alice in Wonderland 2. But the word is that Johnny Depp is coming on board. He will return as the Mad Hatter for the sequel, because I'm sure they will pay him enough. Kind of like a side story, I was also thinking of covering this, so I'll cheat a little bit, is that Johnny Depp also announced on Friday that he was dropping out of, I think, the Whitey Bulger. It's a burglar film. He was going to play it, but they decided they couldn't afford the original salary they'd promised him. And Johnny Depp was like, well, then I'm not doing it. If you're not going to pay me, I think the number was like 20 million, well, then go make your movie with somebody else. And I find that really surprising, because he's certainly going to make the money on Alice in Wonderland 2. He makes his money on Alice in Wonderland 2, the Pirates franchise. So he can go make these smaller films for less, because I think that he desperately needs the smaller films to kind of balance out his acting street cred, both with Hollywood and audiences. I think, it was just disappointing to hear that Johnny Depp would do that. But my favorite aspect of the news about Alice in Wonderland 2 is that the screenwriter, talking about screenwriters, is that Linda Wolverton will be staying on board. She wrote the first one. I know a lot of you didn't like it, so you might not be happy about that news. But Linda Wolverton is a fantastic writer. She writes great female characters. She wrote the first Beauty and the Beast animated version for Disney that was the first animated film to be ever nominated for a Best Picture live action Oscar, the main category. And so I think it's great to see her return, and that Disney respected her contribution to the first film. Also, Disney, very incestuous over there. She is writing Maleficent. She's co-writing it with Paul Dini, actually, who you all might know as the writer on the Justice League Unlimited, and also perhaps even more famously, Batman the Animated Series. So those are the first two stories for today. Third story, Kon-Tiki. On Friday, I also reported that Pirates 5 had gotten its directors, and they were the Kon-Tiki duo from Norway. And a number of you in the comments had said, oh, you should totally see Kon-Tiki. It's a great movie, and these guys are a great choice. And so, lo and behold, I'd already seen Now You See Me earlier, because I'd done the junket, and I wasn't going to see After Earth after everyone had panned it in the audience reaction on Friday for Beyond the Trailer. So I was walking in New York City, and I happened across the Paris Theater, where, what do you know, they're playing Kon-Tiki. And I was like, oh, it's fate. I just was covering this. I'm going to see it. And I'm so glad I did. Those of you who said it was a great film were correct. I loved it. It was a beautiful film in particular. I think Pirates 5 is going to be quite the stunner. And I think they did a nice job, and they really did a good job capturing the period that the film takes place. Even not only the islands where Thor Heyerdahl, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Tor Heyerdahl, was traveling, but also New York City when he was looking for financing. The whole film, really well done. And also, the lead actor was fantastic. I really loved him. I thought he had so much charisma. And I've been wondering a little bit about that, because I've been on the fence about Henry Cavill. I've been telling you that I don't really quite see charisma coming from him, and at least in the trailers. And a number of you have been like, well, you just don't know Henry Cavill. Once you meet him in the movie, you're going to love him. And maybe I will. But it was starting to make me wonder, like, just, because it's been a long time since I've met a new actor, someone totally new, is charisma apparent right away? And I have to say that seeing Kon-Tiki just reaffirmed my belief that it is. Right from the first shot of this guy on the beach with some natives wanting his photo taken, he's just fantastic. He just exudes a lot of charisma. Great job. I don't understand where the Hollywood talent scouts are. I looked him up. He doesn't have any American films planned. I hope Pirates 5 becomes one of them. And I think that when a film is nominated for Best Picture, Best Foreign Language Picture, even though this is in English, which was interesting, but even though it was nominated, I don't understand why Hollywood talent scouts aren't checking out all the talent in those films to see who they could maybe mine for Hollywood. Again, it's just so political in Hollywood. It's a little frustrating, and I'm hoping that maybe we can break that cycle somehow. All right, so those are the three stories. Let's get on to your questions that you asked on Friday in the comments. The first one I thought was a brilliant observation, and it was someone asking about the fact that in the Marvel movies, even though they have so much money and they're so popular, they are really lacking in the music department, and that they don't have distinct scores, musical scores. For instance, when you hear the Superman theme song, you totally know what it is. Star Wars, you just have to hear a few bars. Indiana Jones, so clearly John Williams is great at this. But, even also with The Dark Knight, you can really tell. You can just hear the Dark Knight music and you know that it's Nolan's Batman trilogy. Hell, you can tell when everyone's ripping it off because it's so popular. But that's true. There's no Iron Man theme. There's no Avengers theme. There's no Captain America theme. And perhaps that's a key ingredient and one of the reasons that Marvel films, while they have tons of money and are beloved by a lot of people, don't quite have the cachet that they're so desperately looking for in Phase 2, I feel. So maybe they should consider getting one composer to kind of like oversee their whole cinematic universe and give it some cohesiveness and something for audiences to really remember it by. Because I think we can all tell score really is imperative in that when you think about the scores that stand out to you. So the last question for today is, I think, something that a lot of people often wonder about and ask me about in the comments is, what does it take? What do I judge a movie's success by? What does it take for me to say that movie was successful? And I think that's an excellent question. There are really two paths that a film can take, and actually both end up with it being profitable for the studio. So bottom line, that's the most important thing. Is a film profitable for a studio? And the most obvious way is at the box office. Did it make money? Was there a return on the investment? So as I pointed out a number of times in Movie Math, because of the way the sliding scale works with theaters and studios about the percentage, it starts out in the studio's favor, but the longer a film is in theaters, the more money that the theater gets off of it. But it still works out to about half. The studio takes home half of a film's worldwide haul. So if a film grosses $400 million at the box office, the studio only gets $200 million. And then, of course, the budget never includes the advertising numbers, what it costs for advertising. And for a major blockbuster, that costs $100 million is a conservative number. It's usually $130 million or $150 million for advertising. And I'd say for a smaller film, it could be around, you're looking at maybe $20, $40 million. So it's expensive. So a film has to make, I would say, a little bit more than double its budget. So that of course is where you're starting to look for whether or not a film is successful. Also, a film really needs and also to be impressive, a film needs to cross the century mark. That's an important milestone. It has to make over $100 million at the domestic box office. That's a very important litmus test. And then, of course, we're getting to the point where worldwide, it's got to make, $1 billion, obviously, is what's expected of these comic book franchises these days. If you don't make $1 billion, it's kind of like, you always have to factor in perspective. It's like, how does this look in comparison to XYZ other movies in the same field? So, those are the numbers where a film is successful. But this person asked, well, what about the movie that's just never going to make $1 billion or $100 million? How do you judge that success? For instance, Drive. Why do I not consider Drive a huge success? I feel Drive is to some degree a cult success. That's why I think studios haven't completely given up on Ryan Gosling or Nicholas Winding Refn, because there's potential to make money there, and that these people have this talent has a fan base, and it gets attention for a film. That said, because they didn't have the huge financial success, a studio isn't going to particularly trust them like they do, say, Christopher Nolan, who's given carte blanche to do anything he wants. So Nicholas Winding Refn has the brakes applied, but they still know he's a name to fanboys. But however, they wanted to make a sequel to Drive, so if a movie if I've heard from the people themselves, Ryan Gosling has said, I wanted to make a sequel. He said that to me in person when I interviewed him for Beyond the Pines, and they weren't able to. That is a failure, I feel, on that side. And then so there's the two paths though are, I'm sorry, this is a very complicated answer, so I'm trying to give you the short answer, the short version. So there's the box office numbers, but then there's also critical success, which comes in a couple of ways. If it gets amazing reviews across the board, studios can use that to make money down the line. Even though the mainstream moviegoer won't actually see the film, they'll hear all the great buzz and the great reviews, so they can plaster that person's name on the poster for the next movie, and they can get people to come in. It's sort of like what happened with Lost. Not a huge ratings juggernaut, but people heard such good things about it from its cult fan base that you can say from Damon Lindelof, the writer of Lost, and the mainstream moviegoer who doesn't know that series totally went off the rails, comes in and goes to see that movie in the theater based on, that word of mouth, that reputation. So you can get that reputation from great reviews, you can get it from Oscar nominations. That's why when maybe not the most successful actor wins an Oscar or gets Oscar nominated, that guarantees at least another 10 years of acting on their resume, if not for life, because the studio can always stick up for Academy Award nominee or Academy Award winner on all the advertising. So when you're wondering what's going through a studio's mind, the simple answer, then the shortest answer I can give you actually, is how can I make money off of this? So that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at films for their success. I'm sure we'll discuss this more because, as I said, it's very complicated. And speaking of box office success and the like, Movie Math is coming later today. Thanks for tuning in to Morning Movie News. Write down below what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.